Folks, thank you for tuning in. Start of the week. Thanks for tuning in also over the weekend. Got some great news and some disturbing news that we've got to chime into today. Thank you for all your support on this, and keep those comments coming in. Jumping first to Iran, as we try and do each day, looking at what's going on there. Ground troops now being projected, possible ground troops from the U.S. To head to the Middle East. President Trump had said there wouldn't be any of these, but the war has taken some twists and turns there. The Houthis, this is the band of Islamic radicals that mainly hide out in Yemen, in the country of Yemen, and have always been financed by Iran. The Houthis are killers, they are terrorists, they are Islamic extremists. They strike all around the Middle East, torturing, raping, killing. It seems to be whether it's Hamas or whether it's Iran's particular brand of Islam, this seems to be the trademark, and looks like things are going to heat up there. The focus, again, a lot more discussion about, we've talked about this before, Karg Island is an island right really at the coast of Iran, where most of their refining capabilities take place. And increasingly that looks to be a target, but that would take ground troops to do that. Across the United States this weekend, they say there was a record number of what they call No Kings rallies. This is the strong leftist activist group, mainly funded by wealthy liberals in the U.S., and it's mainly white, college-educated kids, if you want to call it that, who turn up at these things. They say they had, it's an all-time record, 8 million people protesting across the U.S. Breaking that down, if this was accurate, that's at 3,300 different locations, towns and cities and colleges. So averaging, about 2,000 people per location. We'll see if that's a movement or not, and we'll try and kind of get a handle on that. Well, North Korea is seen increasingly as a source where people were maybe wondering where and how Iran can get all of the ballistic capability that they have. North Korea has been and continues to supply Iran in that regard, and that, of course, causing some concerns, causing also some increased focus possibly from the Trump regime. Taking a look at that, we'll see where that goes. In terms of what's happening on the markets, we like to keep you up to date on that. NASDAQ and the Standard & Poor's both down about 10%. I've gotten some comments and questions, people saying, can you please explain what is the NASDAQ market or the index? What is the S&P index? Well, basically, the S&P stands for Standard & Poor's. Those are two of the large rating agencies in the U.S., and they have a list of what they call the top 500 companies that are registered on the stock market. That would be in terms of volume. And so they monitor those. They cut across all kinds of industries. These are the top corporations. And then they take an average of how the stocks are doing, moving up or down. So they don't look at certain specifics. You can still have breakthrough stocks or companies that are doing well, but overall, these companies, which are a measurement of how the economy is doing, down about 10%. That's very significant. NASDAQ is about 3,000 companies. These tend to be a little smaller in size than the Standard & Poor's and more directed to tech-related companies. Standard & Poor's is more generalized. NASDAQ is more tech-related. So by looking at the two, you get to see, is this an across-the-economy rise in the market or an across-the-economy drop? So when you have both NASDAQ and S&P saying they're looking at a drop of about 10%, that's pretty well across the economy. That is significant, and price of oil settling in again around the $110 a barrel mark. That's about a 50% increase since the crisis began. So these things are definitely having an impact on the economy for sure. Well, in Canada, as we predicted to our regular listeners and watchers here at Stockwell Day-to-Day News, we predicted quite a while ago that Avi Lewis would be the winner of the leadership race for the new Democrat Party in Canada. That's Canada's official socialist party, and indeed he did win last night. That is going to, I think, spell an increase. This is my prediction, an increase in support for the NDP, for the Socialist Party in Canada. He's a very good articulator. He comes across as passionate and intense, and I would say watch for him to start to pull that party back together. Well, something that needed to be pulled back together and didn't come together, the whole aspect that was launched by Justin Trudeau when he was Prime Minister. He was convinced that Canadians were going to love eating crickets, and so hundreds of millions of dollars were invested in a cricket manufacturing plant, and that was near London, Ontario, in Canada. Not so well, not so good, not so crunchy and munchy. Well, they were crunchy, they just weren't that munchy. It's gone into full bankruptcy. Again, after hundreds of millions of dollars. This is a gigantic factory. And Justin Trudeau and, of course, the rest of the Liberals thinking Canadians were going to enjoy chowing down on roast crickets. I never did see Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister or as a private citizen enjoying meal after meal of crickets. Perhaps he and Katy Perry might like to do a stop back in London, Ontario, and have a fine meal of crickets. Now, the other thing that's interesting is the company's gone bankrupt because one of the things, besides nobody wanting to eat this product, and more people starting to realize, you know what, maybe cow flatulence isn't the reason for a global warming, and there is no global warming, not even the reason for climate change. There's another aspect here. We've been asking the questions, and mainstream media's been asking the questions, what are the terms that were given to the person who bought the plant? All they can find out of this multi-million, $100 million debacle is a gentleman by the name of Hussein Ali bought the plant, and it's called, his company is called Halali. Does that mean that Muslims are now going to start eating crickets? I somehow doubt that. But these are taxpayers' dollars. Nobody's held accountable. Nobody will have to pay the price unless Canadians start voting differently. And we can't find out under what terms and at what amount Mr. Hussein Ali bought this plant. Talking about what we eat in the city of Toronto, this incredibly strange direction under the mayor there, Mayor Chow, talking about Toronto as a city getting into the grocery business. Here we go again. Yeah, they seem to like what the Muslim mayor of New York City, Mandami, has done, saying he's going to get into the grocery business. And now Toronto is going to. This is after every city that's tried it, a number have. It's been a disaster because when you get government trying to get into making goods and products and selling into the private sector, it never works. It was tried in Europe in a major way, of course, under socialist and communist regimes where they promised the masses we're going to get into the grocery business and you're going to have cheap food. No, all it results in is more expensive food and less of it. Bread lines will be the result. This will be a disaster. However, the disaster will happen because not enough people who understand this issue will get out and vote. They want to stay home. You don't care about the crazy plans that have been proven wrong being foisted upon you as taxpayers. So feeling very badly for the city of Toronto as they head down this terrible path. Hopefully, as their municipal elections come up, enough people in Toronto have awakened up that they will toss out the socialists under Mayor Chow and bring in people who understand how to bring prices down. Again, I can't say it enough times, the single greatest reason for inflation is government increasing spending on borrowed dollars. Governments are borrowing now because of their increased spending. That is the single greatest cause. There are others. That's the single greatest cause in your groceries going up. So a great example, City of Toronto increasing spending wildly in all kinds of directions, using borrowed money, wondering why things like grocery costs are going up because the people who grow the product, the people who sell the product, the people who transport the product all have to pay higher taxes. That results in higher costs in groceries. And then they are going to compound it by trying to take it over a terrible direction. Well, in Canada, the Juno Awards, which is Canada's sort of big night for music awards, was held. The comedian known as Mae Martin, apparently she's pretty good. I haven't seen a lot of her stuff. Was hosting. She even made the comment about, she said it's good to be back in Canada because she tours so extensively in the US. So I just want us to reflect a little bit as we look at these different news items. We have these Canadians, and mainly politicians and others, who are telling us how bad the United States is, how we shouldn't have anything to do with the United States, don't spend their money there, don't buy United States product. And here we have the person who's chosen to lead the Juno Awards saying she does extensive traveling and tours in the US. A little bit hypocritical there. The group that won Group of the Year for their album, the group known as Beaches, won the Group of the Year, and their album titled Lesbian of the Year. Gotta admit, I haven't heard that album yet. Not sure that I'll buy it, but that won the Group of the Year award. Joni Mitchell was the star. Joni Mitchell gets many, many awards in Canada with her Canadian roots. Again, talked about the fact that, living in the U.S. and how difficult it is. Again, we're all supposed to buy Canada. We're not supposed to have anything to do with the U.S., and we celebrate all of our stars who live in the U.S. and make their money in the U.S. While also coming out of Ontario, a real appeal from the government in Ontario for more federal funding for support for children with autism. It's now risen, they say, 67,000 children with autism. Children living with autism in Ontario. And, with that huge surge over the last few years, does nobody wonder, is there any research being done on why we've seen such a huge increase in the number of children with autism just over the last few years? Hopefully they'll start to take a look at that, and let's see, in fact, what might happen there. In Nunavut, there's been a huge multi-million, hundreds of millions of dollars going into rare earth, a mining company there, and that's fine. I have no problem with that at all. Again, one of the major investors is a U.S. investor and Trump supporter. So, and I have no issue with that. What I have an issue is mainstream media, especially CBC and the federal liberals, telling the rest of us we can't have anything to do with the U.S., don't travel there, don't buy any of their products. And we see our federal government and we see our entertainers in Canada going full-on engagement financially with the U.S., a little bit hypocritical there. In the U.S., the Bank of America has faced and has agreed to pay out to victims of Jeffrey Epstein $72 million. And they were sued by victims because Bank of America was one of the major lenders to Epstein in terms of a number of his businesses. So huge settlements there. It does beg the question, can you sue a bank if it was lending out money if it didn't know that these businesses were illegal? Apparently, that is the reason they're getting sued. They say they did know. If they did, then it should be more than lawsuits, really. What about the CEO? What about the top people at the bank if they were knowingly lending money to Epstein when they knew he was a convicted pedophile? In the area of the market that does offer some hope, one of the areas, Elon Musk's company, SpaceX, of course, huge, gigantic company, and it's still moving towards an IPO. That means individuals will be able to buy shares in that company maybe as early as the end of June. A lot of interest picking up there. They say that sale could be the largest in history, going to what's called an IPO. That means it goes out and people can make purchases of the company, buy shares. They say it could exceed $1 trillion, would be the biggest in history. Well, in the world of so-called entertainment, remember it was right here at Stockwell Day-to-Day News. A few weeks ago, we were talking about people who are influencers, and this dude, clavicular. The clavicular, of course, is that large bone running across the shoulder line. And he has really been a leader in what's called looks maxing. That's everything you can do to enhance how you look, even if it means surgery, if it means Botox, whatever it means. And he's been a proponent of this, saying that will make you happy. This young man, of course, featured and photographed everywhere around the world, and just been picked up and charged with battery. I don't mean having batteries. I mean really physical abuse of somebody in Florida. We'll see. I guess the looks maxing may not be working that well. He's obviously not too confident in how he looks. Well, the beloved song and theme song that goes with the beloved musical play Lion King, the writer of that song, that's right at the start, and we all are so familiar with that, even though it's sung in another language, at least the opening line. The writer of that, Lebo M., is suing a comedian by the name of Learn More Jirazi, and he's from Africa also. Made a joke. All he did was make a joke. He said, yeah, the actual translation of the title, it talks about the lion being the king and the majestic lion. And he made a joke about it, this comedian, saying, look, a lion, oh my God. Now he's being sued for millions of dollars for degrading that song. Don't know if it'll be successful or not. Another lawsuit that just failed, Babylon Bee, as you know, it's a satirical online platform. They use animation, they use comedy lines. They are nasty about going after politicians, really go after politicians in a big way. And they were sued by the state of Hawaii, because the governor of Hawaii said it's just not right that somebody can laugh at and mock politicians and make politicians look bad. Not fair, said the governor and other politicians. So they sued Babylon Bee, and that suit has just been not settled. It failed miserably. So politicians, if you don't like getting laughed at, maybe think about what you're doing or saying, but don't try suing the people making fun of you. The Washington Post talks about a huge 3-day event in Washington, D.C. this weekend, all for the betting markets. And as we've talked about here again on the show, groups like Polymarket and others that get people to bet on just about anything imaginable. You can either make money or lose money. Some of the main areas being bet on, of course, the war itself, Iran war, how long is it going to last? And even a lot of bets coming in on the return of Jesus Christ, believe it or not, people betting on that. That one kind of made me wonder, because if you're betting that on the day Jesus will return and you're right, I guess you get awarded for that on the day that Jesus comes back, according to the Bible, and takes his followers up to heaven. So how would you even collect? And on the converse of that, if you bet and you're not on the side that gets taken up, are you going to be able to spend that money? Kind of strange, but people were even betting on that. One thing Gen Z is betting on is more reasonable places to live. And so it's a noticeable movement over the last 2 years of Gen Z moving to the Midwest, moving out of the big cities, moving even away from some of the coastal areas, which tend to be a lot more expensive, moving to where, guess what? Taxes are lower. Property values are lower. In the Midwest, the states there tend to be more conservative, more focused on keeping taxes down, more focused on keeping prices down, and we're seeing a real move in that direction. We'll see if that continues. As they move to the Midwest and to lower priced states and cities, we also see Gen Z moving away from news type media, moving more to social media, and that's where you see onliners like Candace Owen and others, and I disagree with much of what she talks about, but she's very significantly on social media, and you're seeing away from that. So a real challenge, not just for political parties, but for others wanting to get the news of what's happening to Gen Z. They're not going to the usual news shows. Well, AI has broken through with music. Of course, we've known that AI, the ability for music to be generated artificially, but they're doing it so well that you can't even tell. So just since January, just in this last year, 3 of the top 5 songs in popular music were all AI generated. Songs like "Heart on My Sleeve," if you're aware of that one. and even in Christian music. Matter of fact, just charting #1 on iTunes Christian music, a song called Find Your Rest, sung by even these AI artists, even though they're not humans, they do have names, sung by Solomon Ray. So artificially or not, find your rest, and finding it in God or in Christ seems to be a theme that's picking up. Hope you enjoyed the broadcast. Any folks, give me your comments. Tune in tomorrow. Thanks again.